Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Okay, I guess today we got a couple of questions. Somebody's asking about an E3 display that's not treating them too well when it comes to powering up their hot end. So we're going to investigate that. I'm getting the E3 ready right now, and I'll be able to pop it over, but does anybody have any other questions they want to ask? Because I got to research two things on this today. So hopefully I'll be able to do at least part of it. Essentially, we got to see if the G codes work. So I'm pulling the display right now. There we go. So there's the E3, I believe. Obviously you can see the ceiling. And let me pop into the chat and see how it's going. I'm hoping everybody can hear me. There's not a big echo or anything like that. But essentially, I'm not sure off the top of my head which board they were talking about, so I gotta check this real quick. I think they said the SKR version 2. But I gotta check the comments here. Okay, hang on a second. I gotta actually add a comment to YouTube. Someone's trying to find the Discord link. So I'm gonna copy it and paste it into their comment. Give me a second here to get it. Oh wow, there we go. So let me just grab it real quick here. So for those that don't know, I'll paste this in the chat in a second. Well, if you're in the chat already, you probably know where Discord is. So let me put this in the link so that they know. Okay. So first question that I had with somebody was that the BTT doesn't work, but it looks like they're asking on the ramps why it doesn't work, which we can try that. It's been a while, so essentially on the ramps you're not going to be able to use your UART very easily, but you will be able to use excuse me, your TFT cable. You won't be able to use that probably, but I have to figure it out. But you can use obviously EXP 1 and 2, I believe. So I gotta grab our ramps to do this. But I'll see if I can do that real quick here. I gotta pull this up and clean up a little because I was obviously recording some tutorials on this and testing stuff. But essentially they want to know if they can use it to heat their hot end, and they're saying there's an issue. So what I need to figure out is if there is an issue or isn't. And my guess is that there probably is not an issue. But you never know, because I've seen issues before that I didn't think were issues. And the ramps is very old by today's standards, so let me grab one. Okay, here's a ramps. So I need a special connector for this. Let me see if I've got it. Otherwise, it's going to be a pin's hell. This might take a few seconds. Oh, there it is. So there's a converter that you put on this so you don't have to do jumper wires. And it looks like this. So I'm assuming that's what they've got. And I don't know if they're using the touch screen or not. They might be using it as a regular ramps. So essentially this, for the ramps, goes on here, if I can align it correctly. Might have to turn it and look myself. So essentially, it goes on all these pins, and then you push it down. Then you can run ribbon cables to it, and I gotta find some ribbon cables because apparently they're not where I left them. It's gonna take 2 seconds more to find them. Okay, it might be in the other crate. Hang on a second. Okay. Here we go. So I got some ribbon cables. So I'm gonna pop this TFT cable out for the moment, and I'll check on the chat in 2 seconds. Just have to get situated here. Well, thanks for the loving my tutorials. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lock this down so it doesn't slide around on me real quick here. And we're gonna have to figure out how to connect this. I believe it's EXP1 and EXP2. So let me see what it looks like under the camera real quick here. So let me center things a little. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to attach a ribbon cable over here. And I believe that EXP, well, I gotta look it up, but I can't see it written on the actual silk screen. So let's try and zoom in and see if we can see anything. Oh, that's not working. Okay. So I'm gonna have to lift this up to look. Okay, so EXP1 I believe is on top, but if we get it wrong, that's okay because we can sort it out. So we're going to connect to EXP1 over here. We'll flip this back over and we'll see if it powers up with USB power. So I believe it's over here and it's powering up. So we're in the right neighborhood. So we'll do the second cable. Now you can't really do this or damage this if you get the cables reversed. Or at least as far as I know you can't. You just reverse the cables if something goes wrong. So this goes to EXP2, and then we'll place that back down, and we'll power it back up again. So currently it will show the touchscreen, but it'll show no printer attached. This is probably because you're not set up with the TFT cable. So we're going to have to hook it up with the legacy mode, which is an emulator. So you hold this down and you turn to Marlin mode and hit enter. And currently it's not set up for Marlin mode on this board. So what we're going to do is have to go over to VS Code to set this up. Let me see if I can lower the glare a little. Well, the glare is coming from the ceiling, so let's see if I can situate this better. There we go. So I'm going to go over to the workbench in just a second. So on my desktop, for those that don't know, we can go to the Marlin website and download the latest build, but I already have it. So let me show you that real quick. So over here is the Marlin website. It's also a great source of information for different things. But what we're interested in is going over to the actual downloads folder I have over here. And I gotta check my VS Code real quick. So in VS Code I had it open because I was working on something, so I'm gonna close that. And what I'm going to have to do is actually reset to where I was in the beginning. So I'm going to delete this folder because I'm not working on it right now. And I'm going to unzip a new one real quick. So extract all, and then extract. And while that's extracting, I'll take a look at the chat real quick. Okay, overclocking, I'm not sure how to do yet on the SKR board, or even if it's wise to do yet. I'll have to research that. But at the moment, I'm not sure if it's possible unless something changes on the clock, being the crystal clock. But I'm also not an electrical engineer, so that might be a little difficult. So that's extracted. So I'm going to go to Open Folder, Download Folder, Marlin 2.0, Marlin 2.0, Select Folder. Now the default is already set in here to the Mega 2560, which is the chipset we're working with on this particular configuration. So I believe the setting for this, it's been a while, is RepRap. Sorry, I'm looking in the wrong place. So let me go back up to the top for a second. It's actually in configurations. So Marlin configuration.h. We're already set for the motherboard, which is the RAMPS 1.4 EFB. EFB is Extruder, Fan, and Bed. So I'm going to search on RepRap _ discount, I believe. And we'll try this one. If it's not this one, there's a second one we can try. So I'll hit Control/. That'll remove the comment, so it'll enable it. Now there are other things that we may need to enable, and those are going to be under, let me bring it up to the top here. I think it's LCD and SD support. So we're going to do English for the moment, but obviously you can pick another language with either a 2-letter or 5-letter or character code, and the list of them is outlined just below to what you can do. So obviously there's English, Aragonese, Bulgarian, Catalan, Schach, Danish, German or Deutschland, that's why it's the DE, and then of course Greek and so on. But I think what their question's centered around, which is going to be about SD support, which I don't know if it works on this board, but we'll try it. I'm going to enable SD support. I'm also going to try and enable SD check and retry. And so those are all set. Now let's see if there's anything else here that I want to set. There might be reverse select direction. If you're turning it and it goes one way and you want it to go the other, you can always change this, but I'm going to leave it alone. There's also a buzzer or speaker. In this case, it's a piezo buzzer on the back of the LCD or TFT. So I'm going to enable it for now. And then, of course, there are other settings that may occur, but we're not sure how they're going to affect things. So we're going to leave those alone for now. So what we'll do now is we'll go to the actual build, but I want to do a clean because there's a previous build that was here for the ramps or Mega 2560 chipset. So we don't have to set anything platform.io.ini because it's already set to that. So we'll do a clean, which is the little garbage can down here. Then we'll do a build and upload with this. So it should pass it directly over to the board unless something goes wrong. So far so good. If you do run into an issue like I just did, then you have to correct the first thing that goes wrong. And so it's probably something to do with the COM port in this case. So what we'll do is we'll investigate that real quick. So if I go over here, what I can do is first check the COM port. It's supposed to be 0. So hopefully it is, which it is. So we know that's not the issue. So it's saying something about G code, no file. So I'm going to hold the control button and click on it, and it doesn't show me anything. So I'll do another one, doesn't show me anything. So I'm going to hit the rebuild button for the upload, and hopefully that error is gone. But it could always come back, so we'll see what happens. Okay, it looks like it's successful. So something is building out of order. That's what it means. It's more of an advanced comp side topic, but something they set up that I enabled may have caused it to build out of order. And so rebuilding it, it's there now, so it's able to use it. Or it's just dumb luck, but in this case, I don't think it's dumb luck. So this is uploading now, or writing to the board, and it's finished. So what we're going to do is go back over to the board and see if it changed. So hang on a second while I get us back over there. So we're back on the board. It hasn't changed yet, so let's try a power cycle and see if it fixes it. So nothing has changed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to VS Code and see if I can fix that. So if we go in here and we search on RepRap again, _discount. So there's a second one that we could enable. So we got to find the first one. So let's go up, and we're gonna basically hit Control/ on this to comment it out. Then we'll go back to the second one, and we'll remove the comment here. Then we'll try the upload again, and hopefully this will fix the problem. Otherwise, there might be more research to do because the actual ribbon cable might be different. But let's watch the bench and see what happens. So I'm going to transition over to here. It's almost done writing, so it should restart or maybe not. So it's reading right now. So let's see what happens. I've actually never hooked this up to this board, so what's going to happen is anybody's guess. So nothing's happened so far. It's completed. So let's boot this again. So it may not work in this configuration. Let's try a different board just to make sure it's working. So I got to grab one real quick here. So we have a different board that we can hook up to it. So I'm going to power this down. This is actually a RepRap Discount Full Graphics Smart Controller. So I'm going to remove these ribbon cables and plug in these. It might be that we have a bad cable. So let's find number 1. We'll find number 2. Notice how I powered down the system too. That's just so I can prevent it from cooking something by accident. And power it back up. So apparently it doesn't look like it's working, but let's try something else here. We'll power it down and we'll swap the cable order. In theory, this should work. It could also be that I have a bad display. Twice. So it's not powering up that way. So that looks like it's on correctly, unless something's damaged on this board, which is a possibility. But let's go back and try and build it the other way and see if we can solve the problem. So let's go back over to the desktop, and we're going to check to see what we have here. RepRap Discount Smart Controller, and on it it says RepRap Discount Full Graphics Smart Controller. So we'll comment that out and we'll see if we can find it. So I'm going to change this to full. Let's see, discount underscore full. And let's try this one again, or for the first time, I'm not sure which. And so I'm going to reload again. And we'll see if this works. So I'm going to go back over to the workbench and, whoop, maybe not. So let's see what's going on here. So something about fast PWM. Let's try rebuilding. And hopefully this will resolve it. Let's give it a second more just to make sure it's working. Okay, so it looks like we're successful. So let's go back over to the desktop and watch what happens. I'll hold this up and we'll see if we get anything on it. That, and I'll check comments real quick. Let's see. Will we ever see a 64-bit board like the SKR2 in the near future? That's a business decision by whoever manufactures it. The issue is when you manufacture something like computers, if you go straight to 64-bit, you lose out on some capital investment by people buying. So 64-bit might be off in the distant future. But there are ways to get around processing at 32-bit and get better information. We've had this conversation about the Raspberry Pi. It's a 64-bit processor, but they're doing it on a 32-bit operating system. If they change it to 64-bit in the near future, which they're working on, then you can get more out of it. So as you can see, the display is now working. So we know that it was a settings issue. So I'm going to power this down and I'm going to connect the other one up again. Obviously, I know not everybody has these resources of extra boards at home. These are just things I've collected over the years doing tutorials. So let's see what happens now. So Marlin mode. So I'm not sure if it actually works in this configuration. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Sorry about that. So it does work there. So their next issue had to do with power going to their extruder. So let's see if we can research what's going on with that. So if I go over and I grab an extruder, or maybe better yet, a heat bed for now. Okay, hang on a second. Let me see if I can find an extruder that's laying around. Here's one. So here's an extruder. It takes 2 inputs. I don't suggest buying this particular one, but this is good for at least tutorials. So what we need to figure out on this board is how to connect it, and it's been forever and a day. I think thermistors are up in here someplace, but I have to look at the pinout diagram. So I'm going to power it down, and then we'll go back over and see if we can find that. So if we go to the desktop, and you guys didn't see a single thing I just did you? Okay, sorry about that. Let me show you that it's working. So apparently I was talking and got a little excited, but this is actually working. Give it a second and it should load. There we go. So sometimes I forget to switch screens, and that's why you guys don't see what I'm doing. So let me see if I can get this in a position. I'm going to close this for a second, go back over to the desktop. And now what we want to do is actually find out the pinout diagram. So we'll do ramps, pinouts. We'll click over here. You can see the pinouts over here. So what we're looking for is thermistors. So I've got to look around the board for a second. I know the thermistors are someplace. I think they're right here. T0, 1, and 2. T0, I believe, is going to be the hot end, but we can check that because I think it's EFB, which is extruder fan bed. So it's probably T0. And then the extruder, I believe, might be D10, but we can look at that and confirm it in the actual firmware. So the way you can do this is you can go over to here, go to source, go to pins, and then we're looking for the mega, I believe. And then inside here, we're going to look for the pins file. And it's the mega 2560, which I don't see. So I don't see ramps either. So we could go to what's called ramps, and that'll make more sense. And we're looking for the ramps 1.4, which I think I just scrolled past. There it is. And so inside here, we're going to look for the extruder fan and bed. So it's going to take me a second to actually see what's going on here because it looks like they changed the file around and I'm in the wrong one. Sorry. 1.4. 1.3. Interesting. Give me a second to actually figure out what I'm doing here because apparently I'm going to the wrong place. And there's a ton more boards. So it's ramps.h. That's why I didn't recognize what was going on. So EFB is extruder fan bed. So down here, we're going to find the extruder in the pins file. So this is the stepper. So we got temperature pins. So these are the thermistors. So the very first one is probably, well, it's analog input, obviously. But I'm trying to find the actual hot end pin. So what we've got here are MOSFETs. So this is heaters and fans. So as you can see, it's not very specific yet. So let's see if we can get more information. So D10 looks like it's for something. It's not real clear. Now obviously I've done tutorials on this in the past, so what we're going to do is, I believe, start with D8, but it might be D9. I'm trying to figure out where the hot end. Okay, so this is the bed. Sorry about that. So it's probably D10 is the heater, which is right here. So it makes more sense, and I guessed correctly. So let's go back over to the workbench. On the workbench, what we need to do is actually power this. So as you can see, I've marked on this connector for power. And unfortunately, I don't have the actual power set up right. So I'm probably going to have to modify a power cable to add it to this. So the power supply needs a second power cable because I'm using it for other things. So let me move some of this out of the way so you can see what I'm about to do. So this is a 12 volt power supply. And down in here, I only have 2 leads on here, and it's for ground and voltage. So we need another set. So let me grab a set real quick. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Okay, I got ones that are pre-ferruled. And ferruling is basically a safe way to keep the wires encapsulated. So these are crimped on. It's a safety feature as well as it makes your printer work better. So down here I have to hook to the second voltage, and I need to tighten this down. And then I've got to go to the second ground and tighten that down, and then lock that down. So now I'll place this back up here. Let me visually check it real quick. That looks correct, so hopefully we won't see any sparks. So we've got to connect to both of these. So this pops off, and down in here you'll probably be able to see little connectors. These actually close down on the ferrule connectors. Let me find the screwdriver. So if you turn this, you can lock them in place by doing that, or you can loosen them by doing this. So the first set we're going to put in here, slide them in, hold them down with your finger, and tighten them in place. So we're good there. Now we got to do the next set. So obviously I made a mistake. If you can see what I'm doing, this is ground and this is voltage. So before we plug this in and have a disaster, you'll see smoke rise out of the board, or the joke is pixie dust. We have to reverse these. And we'll double check, just in case I marked it wrong, on the pinout diagram before we'll power anything up. So let's do that in just a second. Okay, that's nice and tight, but let's double check real quick. So if I go over to the desktop and I click on the pinout diagram, what we're looking for is positive and negative. Positive is going to be voltage, negative is going to be ground. So we're going to have to attach both of these with power. So let's go back over to the workbench and do the next one. So give me a second to dig out the cable. Here we go. So it's the same deal again. Slide that in. Tighten it down. And then do the same with this one. And hopefully this will prevent any kind of disastrous condition, because now these are covered, so there's no exposed wires and it's kind of hard to touch those. So we'll slide this back in. And then what we have to do is hook up the power for the actual extruder, which you can barely see. But we're going to not do the fan for now, because I've done that in videos. But let me dig out the cables here. So the first thing that we need to do is connect the thermistor, which I have as two separate wires. It doesn't matter the actual polarity. So first one, second one for the first extruder. Then we've got to connect the actual power, and of course I put ferrule connectors on it yet again. So I've got to loosen D10, which is up here, and also polarity doesn't matter in this case as well. So I'm going to slide in one if I can see it and tighten it down, and I'll check it by pulling on it a little, and I'll do the same with this one. Okay, those are in there good. So now what we can do is check temperature, and this is before we power it up. So we'll power it up with just 5 volts, and this way we can get a read off it. So what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna go over to the actual power supply in Pronterface on the desktop. So let me see if I've got it up and running. Of course I got to restart it real quick. So give me 2 seconds to get this so I can let you see it. So inside Pronterface, when it opens, you'll see this. Now, one of the issues we'll run into is we can't directly connect to it on COM port 1, because that's usually a default for the computer. So we can click here and check to see if it's one of these, or the more precise way is to go to Device Manager, open that up, then go to Ports, and you can see that the Mega 2560 shows up as COM port 5. So we can click the drop down in this case and click Connect. So now we're connected to the board. It says a lot about its stats right here. But what we're interested in is that it's telling temperature, which you can see right here. So I'll give you a better view of what I'm doing. So I'm verifying that the actual sensor is working and it's not 0. So if we click or we hold our hand over this, it might heat up based off the heat of our hand. And so we know it's working. So the next thing we want to do is actually try it on the display. So I have to plug this in a second, so I got to trace the cables out real quick. Okay, so I got the cable. I'm going to energize the system, so this might be dangerous if there's something wrong, so always keep your work area as clean as possible. Okay, that's powered up. So let's go over to the workbench and try this on the display. So on the display, we're going to see if we can turn on the heat. Hang on, I've got to bring on the camera again. So I'll click here, then I'll go to temperature, and then I'll go to, I guess, nozzle, and I'll crank it up to, let's say, 40 degrees Celsius. It's going to be kind of hot, but we'll see if this works. So it looks like the heater just went on and there's no failures. Right now this is probably getting warm. I don't suggest touching it, but we can monitor this inside pronner face. So I'll show you this. So right here it says it's already 40 degrees Celsius. So we know it's working. So the person that had the cold extruder issue, it's probably related to the thermistor connections. That's usually what it is. So let me put this down and power the system down and let that cool off, and I'll check on the comments real quick. So let me bring up the comments and see what we got here. Yeah, it's I've had several thermistors go bad, so it gets profoundly annoying when it's not working. So I'll show you a trick to make it work or not work. So one of the things you can do to cause it to fail, just pull those. Then it'll give you an issue. So you can see there's a minimum temp issue. So obviously that might be the reason that they're having an issue, is that it's lost its ability to have a circuit. So does anybody have any other questions, comments, concerns? Obviously I can't do the BL Touch just yet. I'm waiting on parts to arrive from Misumi. So as soon as they send the custom parts I ordered, I should be able to assemble the printer so that it'll fit under the actual camera setup. And I also have to make a mod to my speaker holder so that it's not on the rail anymore. But hopefully soon I'll have the jig fixed so it actually works a little bit better. I'm also having power issues obviously with my camera, so it might blink out every once in a while. But hopefully I'll get a better camera one of these days. Okay, so let me see if I've got other questions that I've seen from Discord. So right now I'm looking at the live chat in Discord. It gets kind of busy, so it takes me a second to scan through it. But there was a question about using different types of sensors. One of the sensors someone wanted to use was a sensor for the octopus. Now, I would do the tutorial tonight or explain it, but the issue that I have is when I start messing around with things that are new or different, we might have issues where I destroy the board by accident. So I usually save those till last because I've got about 10 more tutorials to do. And so I'm trying to preserve the board with what I know how to do easily. I actually know how to do the actual setup for the board for what he's talking about, but obviously I want to make sure that I get all my other tutorials done before I set the board on fire. So let me check on the chat real quick here. Let's see, ramps 1.6 with TMC setup instructions would be helpful for you. 1.6 with TMC involves a lot of soldering or connections of special cables. Essentially, I think it's a resistor, but let's see what the instructions say inside of Marlin. So if I go over to Marlin for a second, I believe there's something written in here someplace about TMC, unless they changed it. So let's search on it real quick. It might be in the advanced settings. Well, it might not be there anymore. Sorry, I'm just looking around to see if there's any comments. Let's see if there's anything on advanced configuration about TMC. But there's a special wiring bundle you need to make. And the reason I don't do the tutorial for this board is because it's integrated into the other boards. So it's a little bit unnatural to do on this board, but it involves using the pins over in here and adjusting them for it. And so I think it's 2 pins per board on the TMC 2209s. And then for SPI, it's several pins. Part of them can be daisy chained, but the signal pins are obviously separate. So it's a wiring mess to show people. So I try and avoid that tutorial. I like to try and keep them clean and safe. But maybe someday there are existing tutorials out there. But I personally don't like to do special wiring anymore. I like to keep things as clean and simple as possible for the end user. But I know that some of the new ramps coming out will have it etched into the board. Let me see if I can pull that up. So let me see where I am first. So if we go over here, we can look for the ramps 1.4. I believe it's on RepRap Wiki. So if you go over here, this talks about the ramps. It's a really good document. There's a newer version of the ramps where they have the actual pinouts built in, I think, if they've actually released it. So let's cheat and go to the ramps 1.6. So it's still not in there on the 1.6. Let's try 1.7. It's probably not in here. So they have the pins integrated into the board for that. So it's easier to work with. It's already possibly in the tracings. But I don't know if this board has actually ever been manufactured yet. So what you could do is build it based off of what they've got for the actual plans. But I don't think it's available just yet. So that was 2 years ago, and other boards have come out since, so there might not be a incentive for companies to produce it because there are already boards out there that actually do this, that are open source. So I don't know if we'll actually see this coming, because this is a lot like the SKR at this point, just laid out differently. So if you want to probably simplify your life, it might be easier just to jump to an SKR board to actually have that functionality rather than constructing your own. But does anybody else have any questions or comments that they want to express so that we can see what we can do here? And for those that are sending super chats, thanks. I can't exactly see them in the mode I'm in, but I know there's probably a couple flowing in and I'm just missing them. So let's see if I can find some more issues that people have been talking about. We had an issue with someone earlier today having trouble with their steppers in the Discord. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up the desk and let you watch me clean for a second and show you this issue, hopefully, and how to actually take care of it. So let me get this out of the way. In this, And I gotta grab a motor. So one of the issues that someone was having was a fresh motor they purchased was vibrating. And the motors are laid out in a specific way inside the actual configuration. And the data sheet will kind of tell you what's going on. So the way that you can test this, I believe they have to be side by side. So I have this here, and what I need to do is grab a LED, or let me see if I've got one floating around on the desk. Looks like I don't, so let me see if I can grab one. Okay, this might take a second. I don't know where I put them. It's funny, I can never find a resistor, and I found like 3 of them just now. But that's not what I'm looking for. So I know I have a box of them in the other room. Let me just go see if I got them in the other room. Hang on, I got another jar over here. Yeah, gotta look in the other room. Give me a second. Okay, it's a light emitting diode is what we're going to be working with. So hopefully the camera won't click off on us in a minute because it's set to 30-minute increments. So I'm going to grab one of these blue ones and I'll show you the trick to figuring out if you're lined up correctly. So they should be side by side, I believe. So what you'll do is you'll take the LED and you'll slide it into these 2 holes, and then you'll turn this. And that's the correct configuration, so you can do the same on the other side, and then do this as well. So when you connect these, if you need to reverse them, and you don't want to do it in the software, when you're connected like this, and it's going the wrong way, power down the system, and you can always reverse it this way. Because you're switching the actual polarity of it, or the direction for it. So that's a quick way to troubleshoot it. Granted, it took longer to find the LEDs than actually showing you the trick. But it's always good to have an LED around just in case. Obviously mine wasn't close around, but it was just around the corner. There's a bunch of tricks, obviously, with end stops that a lot of people want to actually test their end stops. And one of those would be like a, what is it, M119 for a G code that'll tell you what the status is. So I have a question, are there any boards that you would recommend for a large 3D printer with a 4-foot by 4-foot print bed and dual extruder setup? There's a hanger printer that you can do even bigger than 4 feet. It runs on fishing wire. I've actually printed out parts for one, but I still haven't built it. Essentially, it runs on wires like a Delta type printer. It's probably a heavy experience project for most people. But essentially, the problem with having 4-foot by 4-foot printers is that the cable length that you're working with for these wires, as you get longer with these cables, the actual power decreases that you can send to this. So you either have to get, thicker wires, or you have to have some way to increase the power on the length. So the hanger printer gets around that problem by keeping them close together, but allowing the printer to actually move a great distance. It's something you print like on a smooth shop floor. But any board will work with that. Essentially, the ramps board will do 2 extruders and 3 steppers. And it's one of the cheapest ones on the market because it's been around forever. But obviously, the SKR has the SKR 1.3, 1.4, or 2.0 will do it easily, as well as the MKX boards. Or MKX, I think, MKR. It's been a while since I've actually looked at those two tutorials as well. So those are some of the things you can actually work with to actually create a larger printer. Let me see if I actually can find the hanger printer. Maybe you want to see what the design looks like. So let me see if I can figure out first where you're looking. Okay, let's go over here. And we want to search on, I think it's 3D hanger printer. Kind of looks like an alien spacecraft. So images, obviously it's not any of those. It's not hangers, obviously. So let's see if it's in the actual Marlin firmware, the name of it. If we do a search on hanger printer, used to be in here. Huh, interesting. So they may have taken it down, but there was a printer that does hanger printer, and I don't see it here anymore. It was near the top. But it might be in the older version of the firmware. So interesting. I know it's still up on YouTube, the guy that developed it. And it looks like a delta on wires. Let's try changing this up a little. Let's try doing this. 3D hanger printer Marlin. Let's see, printer Octopus Marlin alternate, or no, sorry, I'm just translating from German for octopus. Let's see. Interesting, I can't find it right away. Yeah, I think Chris Riley did a tutorial on the guy that built it. Let's see if there's a bunch of videos on it. Hanger printer. Let's try that. Images. There it is. So that's the hanger printer right here. Actually, it's a video, so I gotta stop it. It looks like Thomas did it a long time ago. So 2017. So he's probably the one to watch for that. I haven't built it yet, and I don't really want to copy his material. But that's what the printer looks like, and then you can get your 4-foot surface right here. And you could probably do dual extruders. You may have to modify this. I might redesign this to make it easier to build, but I haven't gotten around to thinking about this yet. But you can see the wires on it, so let's see if we can pull it up. So there it is. All the electronics for driving it. I thought the motors mount on it, but I could be wrong. They could be remote, but you want to keep them as close to the controller board as possible so you don't have any other issues. Okay, sorry, did you already answer my previous question about the LCD screen working with the SKR2? I answered it based on the ramps, because I think that's where I saw the comment. But I can try it on the SKR as well real quick. I just have to do some modification real quick here. So let me pull this board out of the way. Just have to clean up a little. I put museum putty down because it's non-conductive, and also it holds the board in place. It's a quasi safety feature for me, as well as a way to control the actual viewing for you guys. So let me just clean it off a little bit more, and I'll grab a ramps or SKR2 and show you the same thing. Excuse me, SKR2. I just had to find the board, which is I think right here. So here's the SKR2. Let me see if I can set up the view real quick. Now the camera might blink out on me in a second because we're approaching the 30-minute mark. So let me check on it real quick. So it might go off in a second. So let me transfer over so you can see it. If it blinks out, I just have to hit the button to bring it back online. But essentially, I've got to set this board up so that I can actually safely do this. So there's the board. What we were talking about earlier was actually setting this up with power. So let me check this real quick. So the first thing we want to do is set it to USB power just so we can power the board to build it up slowly. So let me grab the display. Now your connection, was it with the TFT cable or was it with the ribbon cables on the display for the E3? Just gotta grab the cables. So here's the E3. So essentially what we're trying to do is set this up without an issue. So I'm going to first set it up using this, so it's slightly different. So what we need to do is find the RS-232, which is right here, and connect to that. Then the other end of the cable needs to connect to the board. So I need to turn up the light so I can see here. So on the board, the TFT cables are either here or here. So to check that, we need to go over to the desktop on my computer And we need to go to the Big Tree Tech GitHub, so BTT GitHub. And then I need to find the SKR board. So let me readjust this so it's normal size. So repository, then you're gonna do SKR2. This will bring us to the board. On the board, we'll go to hardware. Then we'll go to the pinout for it. And what we're looking for is the reset on the actual TFT over here. So as you can see, it's 5 volts ground, then it's 2 sensor pins, or these are TX and RX, I believe, and then a reset pin. So if we go back over to the workbench for a second, you can see that the reset pin is right here. So that means that I gotta orient the cable to the reset on that side and plug it in. So reset's over here. So to test this to make sure it's actually powering up, I have to plug this in and it powers up. So we're good there. Next thing that we would need to do is actually set this up to do a couple of things. And the first thing we're going to start with is actually testing the motor, or excuse me, not the motor, the extruder. So I'm going to push this over for a second. So here's the extruder. We need to know how to connect it. So we're going to have to look at the board and find the actual connections. So essentially what we got to do is we've got to go over to the desktop again and read through this. So on the desktop, what you see down here is HE0, and that's the hot end cabling. So we've got power, which is the positive, and then signal. Technically, they don't matter in this situation, nor do they matter for the hot end down here, which is TH0. Notice how the bed is over here, and then you have PS on. So it's the third one over for the actual hot end. So what we need to do is go back over to the board in a second. So let me show you that. So on the board, I have the cable for the thermistor. It's actually 2 separate connectors. So I'm going to connect one here and the other one here, hopefully. And hopefully I've got those on the actual pins. If not, there'll be an error. Next, I need to connect the actual power inputs, which I have ferrule connectors on to contain the wires just in case there's any issue. And we have to connect it over here. So I'm just going to pop this off, hopefully. Okay, so that's HE0. So the actual polarity in this case doesn't matter. So I'm going to slide that into the little locking connector. And then I'm going to take the screwdriver and tighten it down. Okay, that's nice and tight. So let's do the next one. And notice how you can't see any exposed wire. So I'm going to plug that back in. Next, we're going to have to power the system. So I'm also going to have to do a firmware load. So in this case, I got to pop this out and actually put it into the drive for the USB. So do it like so. And then I'm going to place this in the computer. You might hear a beep. So let's set up the firmware real quick. So I'm going to transition over to here so you can see what I'm doing. And I'll restart the camera in a second. So I'm in a basic configuration. So I'm going to hit Control Z to remove everything that I just set up. So it's back to normal here, and then there's nothing modified here. So to do this, I'm going to go to the very top. First thing we need to do is actually go over to the platform.io.ini. We know that we have the wrong default environment, so we've got to find that. So if we go over here And we go to core boards, being source core boards, and we search on SKR, I think it's _2, or it's V_2. There we go. We have to get the Rev2 version, so we'll copy that. Then we'll close out of boards.h. We'll note the actual chipset right here before we do, which is STM32F407. It's probably just going to go to the 4. So we'll close out of that. Then we'll minimize core. We'll go over to configuration.h, search on motherboard. We'll highlight the ramps board. We'll paste our board over it. Then we have to set the first serial port to -1. And then if we're using the display, I think it's 1. It might be 2, but we can test that. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. We're going to use the same speed. Now, I don't know what the speed is on the display currently, so we're going to have to figure that out. So that's all set. We don't have to worry about the extruders because they're default to their current configuration. So we need to set up the actual build process for platform.io.ini. And as you can see, it's not set correctly, so we have to go to the ini folder, find the ini file for our chipset, which is STM32F4. And then in here, search on SKR2, I think, or _2. And that brings us to the big tree board. So we'll copy that. Then we'll go back over to platform.io.ini. We'll highlight the chipset that's currently there for default environment and paste ours. So it's bigtree _SKR_2. So to check the build, we'll first do a clean because I was working with the ramps earlier. And then I'll click the checkbox for build. And it's a series of compiles. And like I was saying earlier before, if there's a failure, what you can do is try a second build before changing anything. And then if it fails on the second build, then find the very first failure and correct it. Because sometimes things will build out of order. But it looks like it's only happening mostly when I'm in 8-bit configurations now. So as soon as this completes, we're going to have to go over to the .pio folder where it's building. So inside the build folder for SKR2, you can see that it's right down here. So we right click, we go to Reveal in Explorer, or Reveal in File Explorer, and you can see the bin file right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to place it on the boot drive. So I'm going to wipe these out for the second. And then I'm going to go back over, I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to send it to the boot drive. So we can verify it's there. This will get converted after it loads, if it loads correctly, to firmware.cur in capital letters. If you ever need to reload it, you'd rename it to firmware.bin. So it's a great way to save your configuration in case you need to reload it on multiple actual boards. You can just rename it to firmware.bin in lowercase. So now that that's complete, we'll go back over to the desktop. So on the desktop, we pop out the drive. We then take out this SD card, slide it in here. Currently we're on USB power instead of regular power, so we can power it through here. And we'll see if the actual display works now. So I'll hold down here. I'll change it back over to touch mode. And what we're looking for is that the printer display says ready. So we guessed right on the second serial port, so we're good there. So now we can power down the system. We can move the jumper back over because this is how you normally would run it. And then we have to hook up the power. So I gotta quickly modify my power supply to only have one lead coming off it. So give me a second to pop that out. 1, and that's 2. So I just took off a power lead because I was showing it on the ramps. You only need 1 power lead in this case. So as you can see, I've got ferrule connectors. So I need to match them up with where the board power is. So we're going to double check that because I don't like to make mistakes if I can avoid them. So over here, we'll go to the Big Tree Tech website. We'll look up the pins. And down here you see DC in. This is the power for the board. So we've got to find where voltage goes, which is here, and then ground. So we can go back over to the board. And voltage on my board I marked as red so that you can see it. So it's going to be right here. What I like to do, obviously I'm not directly next to my board right now. I like to check it when I actually connect it. But my way to check is to pull as soon as I screw it down to make sure I've got the right one. So it won't pull out if it is the correct terminal. So those are now connected. So obviously I marked voltage with red and nothing for black so that I can keep track of stuff. And if we plug this back in, the board won't power. Then we'll have this over here. I didn't set up the actual fan on the back of this, so it's right there. But I will show you what happens. So let me power the system. So I got to trace out the cable real quick here. And now I'm going to apply power, so don't touch the board or anything on it. So now what should happen is it'll come up. So the first thing that I like to do is test it first in Pronterface, because this gives me a good idea of what's occurring. So in Pronterface, I'm going to go back over to the desktop. I'm going to bring up Pronterface. Obviously, I can't connect to COM port 5 because it's no longer that. So I'm going to have to go to Device Manager and find the actual connection. So as soon as I have this open, I click on ports and it's COM port 4. So I close out of here, click the drop down, select 4, try connecting, and it says the printer is now online. So we can see down here that the thermistor is working. At least it's reading something, whereas the bed one is not. So it says it's 24 degrees Celsius. So if I place my hand on this, hang on a second, let me show you what I'm doing. I'm just warming it with my body temperature. You can see that it's going up due to the sensitivity. So we know that it's actually working at the moment. So what we can do is actually test this on the display. So let me bring this up into the full workbench. So on the display, I'm going to pick this up and move it over a little. And I'm trying to get situated so I'm in a safe place. So you can see it's 26 degrees. So let's go to Menu. Then we'll go to... Well, we can do this several ways. We'll go to Heater. And what we want to do is preheat, I guess. And it wants me to select certain ones. So unfortunately, I'm a little nervous about clicking all the way up to 200 degrees. But let's see if this works. So it's saying unknown command. So I'm going to go back and see if I can do this a different way. So there we go. So we can do nozzle. So it looks like it's actually heating right now, and I can feel heat coming off of it and see it going up. So I'm going to stop it for a second because that's getting kind of hot, but it's actually working. So the temperature was increasing until I just killed it, because obviously I'm not in a printer where I can have it suspended on a carriage, but we're at 83 degrees Celsius. and it's going to start coming down because it's off, but it's working. So usually the issue that occurs with the actual failure has to do with these thermistors becoming disconnected. And when you disconnect these, you'll probably see that error. So I'm going to pull them. And on the display, you can see the power for the actual display is changed to -14, which tells you that there's no connection for thermistors. I'm not going to reconnect it while it's on, and you shouldn't pull stuff when the board is powered. But in this case, I knew it was safe to do. But other people have explained their issues where they've accidentally pulled something from the board and fried their board. So please don't do that when it's powered. So I'm going to power it down. Now the hot end right now is probably about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a little warm. So the issue is probably the thermistor was disconnected or broken, being the glass bead. And I'll show you what one looks like. So one of the issues that can occur on a thermistor is that the wire breaks in here, or gets kinked and broken down in here, or there's a disconnect inside here. Those are usually the general things that cause a failure. But essentially, if there's a broken wire, that's when it occurs. So I hope that answers your question. I'm going to check on the chat because I've been talking forever. Let's see. Oh, I pulled the ribbon cable apart using the 4 pins on the TXT port. Normally, the actual cabling on the SKR will go through the TFT cable. If you don't have a TFT cable, you could probably order one online. Let's see, I actually didn't get a BTT dedicated screen. Trying to connect to a stock Ender 5 Plus screen. Sorry, I didn't make that clear. So, it should, in theory, be similar, but the stock Ender 5 Plus is slightly different. I think I have one nearby. Let's see where I stuck it. Okay, maybe I don't have it close by. Oh, maybe I do. So you're saying you're using something similar to this. Essentially, you can use the ribbon cables on this. I think it's only one ribbon cable that you can connect to either EXP1 or 2, but you have to set something in the firmware so that you can enable it. And that's in my tutorial for either the SKR2 or for the Octopus. I'm not sure which one I did it for. I get easily confused by the number of tutorials that I make. But I hope that answers your question. So does anybody else have any other questions they want answered? Okay, well, for those that have been doing super chats and I can't see them, thank you very much. It's greatly appreciated. Helps me offset the costs to bring you these tutorials. So I just want to wish everybody a good day. Be safe. If you're not vaccinated, get vaccinated. And everyone take care. And hopefully I'll do these next Friday, depending upon how things go. Okay, take care.